Good evening and welcome to our Zoning 101. Our topic tonight is density. I'm so excited to see everyone on the Zoom call. I'm going to allow, I believe we still have a few people that are connecting. So I will allow you all to get connected. Let's see. I wish I had background music. I never have background music. Let's see. All right. My name is Ashley Dixon Oso. I'm the Programs and Communications Director for the Neighborhood Alliance, and we are hosting this workshop in collaboration with the City of Oklahoma City Planning Department. I'd like to welcome all of you to our workshop tonight. It is from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And the format is as follows. We have some great folks on the line to talk to us about our zoning code updates, specifically how density affects our communities. And what we're going to do, they're going to have a presentation. And then at the end of the presentation, we're going to have an opportunity for discussion and questions. If you need some sort of clarification during the presentation, I suggest that you put it in the chat to the right of your screen, and then I will do my best to get Marilyn's attention so that we can get those clarifications made during the presentation. Also, at the end of our presentation, if you have a question, I will encourage everyone, if you look down at the bottom of your screen, there's a button that says reactions. You would just raise your hand, click that button, and it has a hand raise tool. And that way we are able to get to everyone and hopefully answer everyone's questions. A little bit about Neighborhood Alliance. We are a 45-year-old nonprofit. Our mission is to create safe, healthy, and attractive neighborhoods throughout Central Oklahoma. And we do that by providing supportive services, including leadership trainings and one-on-one trainings with neighborhood leaders to build and sustain their own communities. And so I would like to introduce our speakers for tonight. Our speaker is Marilyn Lemonsdorf from the City of Oklahoma City Planning Department. She is in charge of managing the city's development code update process that includes zoning and planning code and subdivision regulations. She is focused on moving the code update project forward. Close the door, please. Close the door.
Future planners.
Close the door, I'm coming. And so she works with consultants and serves as staff for the mayor appointed stakeholder advisory team and assists the community with engagement and outreach, and also works with staff in other city departments as the project progresses. There's Katie. 1 second. I apologize for that. Marilyn has been in the Oklahoma City Planning Department for 4 years. And before joining the Oklahoma City Planning Department, she worked in Austin, Texas, where she spent 3 years on Austin's code update team, focusing on parts of the code related to open space, including urban design, streetscapes, and stormwater infrastructure. We also have on our call tonight a representative from the Office of Sustainability at the City of Oklahoma City, T.O. Bowman is a friend of Neighborhood Alliance, as well as Katie Friddle, our Principal Planner and Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Oklahoma City, who's also a friend as well. Thank you all so much for being here. I believe they will be vetting questions as well throughout this presentation. And right now, I'd like to turn it over to Marilyn, who's going to talk to us. She has a wonderful presentation on density. And so I encourage everyone to get your questions. And before I turn it over to Marilyn, I have a quick poll I want to launch. And you're going to see it pop up on your screen in just a moment. This is just to allow us to get a little bit of demographic information so that we know exactly where you're coming, where you are participating from. And so let's see, you should see it pop up on your screen now. We just want to know what quadrant of the city you are located in. Where do you live? Do you live in the northwest quadrant, northeast, southwest, or southeast? Other maybe rural areas, or maybe urban core. But yes, mostly we just need you to participate by quadrant. I think we have, everyone has already taken the poll. Let's click. So we have 55% Let's see, we share results. Yeah. Can you all see that? 55% for Northwest Oklahoma City, 36 for Northeast, 9 from Southwest. Got that down. I see Kate, Marilyn taking notes. Let's stop that one. I have one more. Okay, then that's it for the first one. So thank you guys for taking that poll. So now I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn Lammensdorf, who's going to talk to us some more about density in our city.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. And everyone's busy. I see a few people who are maybe on last time. We've been working with Neighborhood Alliance to have these workshops. They're not specifically about the code update right now. They're more about the topics that would help you understand when we start rolling out drafts and being talking about more of the specifics. So that's kind of the goal, is to just get y'all up to speed on terminology and some of the concepts. So I'm going to share my screen. I think. Well, it's not letting me. Let's see, 1 second.
Marilyn, I could try to share mine and just run the slides for you.
Yeah, no, I just think I needed to click. Click back and forth a second here. 1 second. There we go. Not enough clicks. Okay, can everyone see?
How's that?
I can see that. I hope others can see it.
I can see it.
Okay. We'll start there and go to the first slide.
Okay. So, and if you can't hear me, put that in the chat too or something. But so today we're just focusing on density. Last time we talked about bulk regulations, but we're just going to talk about what it is and what it can do for Oklahoma City. That's the only 2 topics today. We're going to try and keep it focused. So a lot of times when you hear the word density, you think of like something like this. You think of Seoul or New York City and you think, wow, density. But really on the next slide, density can come in lots of different forms. And here's some densities we have in Oklahoma City. We have, anything from, it's small and large density. We have block apartments like you see on the left. The blue house is just a house and a garage apartment. And then all densities, all types of scales. So I'm going to try and explain how we look at that in the planning and zoning world. So when we talk about density, and the word gets bantered around a lot, but we're really just talking about a calculation. We're talking about how many dwelling units per acre. And I've been a planner for 20 years, and I'm just now beginning to understand this. So maybe in the last couple of years, since I've been doing a lot of code stuff. So this is hard. There's not going to be a test. You may not get it tonight. Some people may already understand it from other professions that they have, but this is a little bit hard. But I just want you to understand the concepts, really, or just be familiar with concepts. So when we talk about an acre, okay, I sort of know what that is, but I don't really know what that is. But really, we know what a football field is. And the white part of the football field that's sort of shaded over, that without the end zones, that's an acre. So just to kind of help you picture that. And on the next slide, so if we took, this is another city's comprehensive plan, and you see those cards on the left side, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cards. If we took any one of those cards and we put them on the football field, that's how much would fit on the football field. We could have just one house, we could have 100 units, any range of this. And so it's kind of just to picture it on a football field, is sort of just trying to figure out a way to show that. And then on the ground, on the next slide, and these aren't all in Oklahoma City, but so this is what density looks like. It can be anything from rural all the way up to downtown. So density is just a calculation of how many dwellings on an acre. And so one of the reasons we've started to hear more about this word density is kind of becoming more, and I think that's one reason I didn't learn about this as a planner 20 years ago in school, is because our friends at Opticos Design, there's some planners, they wrote a book recently, or maybe the last 10 years, called Missing Middle. And so it's sort of becoming more in the vernacular, this missing middle. And really what it is what our grandparents and great-grandparents lived in. They lived, all these different housing types together, but not these massive, they didn't have these like massive apartment complex things. They just all kind of lived more generically together. But then as we began driving cars and we had more roads and we could spread out, we took advantage of that, and we don't have this missing middle anymore. So in this example, on this acre football field, this is 27 dwelling units per acre, and you sort of have to hunt. But on the left side, there's 3 single family homes. There's 6 duplexes in there. Kind of have to count some windows and doors. There's 7 what they call stacked duplexes, 2-story duplexes. And then there's 4 homes, one behind the other, like kind of what they call an accessory unit, or a granny flat, or mother-in-law house, or whatever. There's lots of words for them. So that's 27 dwelling units per acre. So on the next slide, when we go to Oklahoma City, if we go, this is just one example. There's a lot of these in Oklahoma City, and this is Heritage Hills East. And it's almost the exact same thing, 28 dwelling units per acre. This area, the map is almost 14 acres, but if you break it down to per acre, it's about the same as what Missing Middle book is talking about. And I was telling people, I did come from Austin, and I grew up in Fort Worth, and have lived in Miami and a bunch of different places. And I've actually never seen I've never been in a town that has missing middle like Oklahoma City, because I've never really lived in the Midwest. And it's pretty unique and special that we have it here. So we do have it here, and just want to show you that. So now I'm going to explain a little more about density. From single dwellings and then multi-dwellings, just examples of things that, these are all in Oklahoma City. So when you go out to the rural areas, that's 0.3 dwelling units per acre. So it's not even one, you wouldn't even have one house on the football field. It'd only have a third of a house on a football field. And then when we go to more kind of the outer ring areas, what we call urban low in our comprehensive plan, Just, regular houses, that's more like 6 dwelling units per acre. So 6 houses on the football field. And then if we come in a little bit more, we have a little more houses on an acre, that's 10. This is some new houses that were constructed around Villa, and there's a house that was put on the side lot. So if we were to do that all over, that's 10 dwelling units per acre. On the lower left, we had an SPUD that allowed this on Blackwelder, kind of homes on just a little bit narrower lots, and those are 16 dwelling units per acre. And then we get to towards Deep Deuce, the townhomes there, these are attached townhomes, and that's 20 dwelling units per acre. And in downtown also, we have townhomes that are detached, their walls are not attached, and that's 21 dwelling units per acre.
And Marilyn, if I could just add something about the parking that's associated with each of those. So
Yeah.
they have, while there's more dwelling units allowed in places like, Deep Deuce and things, everyone doesn't have, a single parking spot for every, right out in front of their doorway, like you would at a single home, or in a single home, even on the 10 dwelling units. But by the way of the design, and they can design that way in urban areas where all the parking can be in one spot and have, a parking lot that's interior, and then the residence is facing the street. So, along that spectrum that Marilyn's describing of the densities, it doesn't always mean, when someone says density, it doesn't always mean a high rise, but it has that whole spectrum, and that it allows a lot of different configurations to fit on different lots. And when you get into really areas that are already really dense, it creates some challenges for accommodating a lot more families. But we do want people to live, some people anyway, to live in more densely populated areas, so they can access more things more efficiently and not have to rely on a car to get to every single aspect of their life. So anyway, just adding that about parking.
Yes, parking is, we can fit more units if we don't have more parking. But my point here is that these are all single dwellings, and they don't all look like it, but everybody owns their own thing here. Everybody owns their own property here. And then that's not to say anything about, or they might own it and rent it out, but that's why I'm calling them single dwellings. And single dwellings are easier to picture for me on dwelling units per acre. But go to the next slide, T.O., when we get to multi-dwellings. Then it becomes harder to figure out what the dwelling units per acre is by what it looks like, because look, like, so the top left is just one of our regular, apartment complexes. This is out by Coral Springs Mall. It's 20 dwelling units per acre, so not like New York City density or anything, but it has 300 apartments, but it's on 15 acres. The one on the lower right also has 300 apartments, but it's 125 dwelling units per acre. And it's hard when you just look at those to know what you're looking at. And then on the right side and the top, that kind of awkward looking building next to that house is 30 dwelling units per acre. There's only 6 houses in there, but it's on 0.2 acres. So that makes it 30 dwelling units per acre. And then we've got on the lower left in Paseo, this is been there a long time. It's 29 apartments, 46 dwelling units per acre. So even though we're going up, they look so different. It's hard, like in the single, it was like, okay, we understand the progression, but when we get to multi, it's hard to look at it and know anything about what that means. And so just to note that. And then remember our New York City example, that's 300 dwelling units per acre, but it's only 39 apartments, but it's on 0.13 acres. And then I looked at our new national downtown. This isn't Oklahoma City, And I couldn't exactly tell because it's got the concourse underneath. And so the property is a little bit bigger, but as far as just the tower and what's in it on that property, I calculated 0.3 acres, and that's 600 dwelling units per acre. So when you get to multi, it gets a little bit more challenging to figure out what it is. And so in Oklahoma City, this was a graph that T.O. used in our Adapt OKC report when it's a part of the comprehensive plan on our goals for sustainability in the city. And it's an interesting graph because the blue part is, make sure, it shows another way to look at density is the population density. So not only the housing density, but actually how many people live in that area. And so you can see that large blue area. It shows population density before the city began to spread out through 1960 or so. And at that time in 1950, we had 8,300 people per square mile because we didn't have, and what is a square mile? Because that gets confusing. That's 640 acres. So if you had that many people at that density, that's how big it would be. But so we had in 1950, 8,300 people living 8,300 people per square mile living in the core. And as of 2020, you can see we began to spread out. And because we started to annex more and more land, and we became a bigger and bigger city by both population and by square miles. And we went from 287 square miles in 1950 to 622 square miles by 2010. And so our population density dropped lower and lower. I had our guys in the planning department look at the 2020 census and calculate just our urban high and urban medium, our core density now, and it's 3,309. So we're like less than half of the density we were in 1950 in the core. Now let's compare that to New York City, because for scale, New York City has 27,000 people per square mile. So I'm hoping just to give you some metrics about how dense Oklahoma City is or not is with that drawing. So now that I've sort of explained about density, if there were no questions, Ashley.
I don't see any in the chat yet.
Okay.
Oh, wait, I just had one pop up. 1 second. It says, I understand how you calculate dwelling density. However, I am still unclear on the definition of missing middle and why is the terminology important?
It's really about scale, Paula, because like I said, we started building it's like back on that where it was hard to tell the difference between single dwellings, between multi-dwellings, the density, because it really depends on form. And our grandparents used to just sort of sneak it in and do it on a small scale, probably because they didn't have the type of construction and building materials and trucks and things to build the way we can build today. But they built more succinctly, so we go out and build this apartment complex that takes up 15 acres of land to get what was that, 300 apartments? Well, I can't go back to the Heritage Hills slide, but there's a lot of people in Heritage Hills, the same amount of units, in way less space. So that's sort of the missing middle is kind of, we sort of went away from the middle piece. We sort of either we are single family or we're apartments or high rises now. And so what the Missing Middle book is about, in fact, the guy who wrote the book, he grew up in, I think it was like Lincoln, Nebraska. and his grandmother used to live on the second floor of a little shop or something. And he talked about how much food came out of this woman's, one bedroom, house, and how easy it was for her to live there as a senior. And he went and visited her there, and he could walk over there, and it was on Main Street, and he started looking around when he got older, and he was a planner, realizing, they don't do that kind of stuff anymore. You either got to live sort of siloed into an apartment complex, or in like a nursing home, or there's just all these silos. There's no middle ground. There's no middle. I don't know if that makes sense, but so.
Yeah, and Marilyn, she did have a follow-up asking about if it's referring to density that's unaccounted for in a given area. But I think what we're getting at here is types of housing. So, you have your really, really dense ones that she showed, like in New York City and the First National Center, and then you have single family homes. And then there's a middle in between those two, that are the townhouses, the row homes, the courtyard apartments, these types of ththings that were built a lot more pre-World War II, and then kind of stopped being built for a while. And so, it's part of what's contributed to, you've heard about affordable housing crisis and things like these, where there's the middle housing it can be more affordable sometimes without having to live in a high-rise apartment.
Yeah, so middle is not a density. It's not like missing density, it's missing form, how the lot was structured, and that's what we're saying with missing middle. I don't know if Katie.
I just typed in the chat and said it refers to housing types. Sorry, I'm messing with phone computer echo. It refers to housing types that are in the middle between single family and a big apartment complex. Your duplexes, fourplexes, that kind of thing. So it's in the middle on the spectrum of housing types.
Is that clear, Paula? Anybody? Okay, so and we'll have time to have more discussion about this in a minute. But so the second part is sort of, I've had people, we've been doing open houses at libraries across the city. Some of you may have been there. And people, all different types of people keep coming to ask me, what is good about density for Oklahoma City? And so just wanted to go over, there's a lot of reasons, but I just want to go over these 5 to sort of show you some things that we've learned since we spread out in the 1960s about some things our great grandparents and grandparents knew that we forgot about. So the first one, we're talking about health, walkability, neighborhood interaction, city service costs, and then how density your need for where you live may change housing choice throughout your life. So the first one, we're going to talk about health. And the main issues on health are obesity and clean air. Unfortunately, the state of Oklahoma is the 10th most obese state in the country. And Oklahoma County, luckily, is on the lower end of that for the state, but still more than 30% of Oklahoma County adults are obese and that's compared to like 50% in some counties. So they've got a plan, state plan to prevent obesity, 2020. And one of the 3 contributing factors to obesity is sedentary lifestyle. And when we look at, when they looked in the plan about how many adults actually get the exercise they need, it's only 1/3. And kids too. And then we talk about how much sidewalks we have. Well, only half of the neighborhoods have sidewalks. And if you just have less reason to walk, you don't, because it's easier to get in your car, right? So that's one thing. And then the next one, T.O, is so, if we're not walking, we're probably driving. And so the Federal Highway Administration measures something called vehicle miles traveled, VMT. And that data is extrapolated to the census areas, which gives us this map. And I want to be careful with this map because the map shows, red areas, households drive longer distances, which the more you drive, the more you emissions into the atmosphere. Now, that doesn't mean there's worse air in the red areas. It just means where the contributions are theoretically coming from. So the air is definitely not worse in the red areas. It's just contributing more than in the core where people drive less, with the yellow and the green areas. So it's just an indicator where you need to drive less to get the things you need. You're contributing less CO2 in the air than those who drive more. And for health, that means when we have increasing CO2 levels, we have more, problems with asthma, more respiratory tract problems, more, probably more obesity because it's not comfortable to walk, so it creates a lot of problems. So that's one thing is health. And the next slide, T.O., the difference is when we build a little more densely, we have more opportunity to have infrastructure where you can bike, where you can walk. I mean, think about us building bike lanes out. And Oklahoma City's done it. I mean, we've built the bike lanes at enormous costs, spread out over several hundred miles, and kudos to the people who did that. But when we build more densely, it's just a less cost per person to put all that infrastructure in. And we get out more, we make the trips, they're not as long, they're not as daunting. So it's easier to work that into your day. The next square I'll talk about is walkability. You don't really think about this because, you'll go out in your neighborhood probably and take a walk and you're like, Marilyn, I walk 2 or 3 miles in my neighborhood all the time. But when you think about why you do and don't walk, like on the left, top left, there's a beautiful trail that we built in Oklahoma City, but it's along a chain link fence. There's nothing nice to look at. You're looking at roads and traffic lights and there's no shade. So you may not quite walk as long as if you were walking in the middle in that neighborhood where you could maybe wave to someone in the door or have more stuff to look at. The same with on the right, court that's over near Chesapeake. You have a wider sidewalk, you have trees, you have buildings a little closer to the street than you do like next to this parking lot on the lower left. Not too interesting to walk there. I think I might rather walk next to the shops and where I can window shop. And on the right, blank wall, how long am I going to walk? It's not that interesting. I guess maybe if I have a dog, it would be more fun or something. But what you're walking to makes sort of walking less painful. And that's kind of why people walk a lot in New York City. You'll be there and you'll walk 30 blocks. You're like, I'm not going to walk 30 blocks, but then you just kind of start walking and you don't realize you walked the 30 blocks because you've been looking at stuff the whole time. And you're like, wow, I walked 30 blocks. So that's just sort of some concepts of walkability. And the next slide, T.O. Like I said about the infrastructure, when we're spread out like we are in Oklahoma City, we can't just walk everywhere. We've got to have multiple modes of transportation. We've got to use our car, bike. Now we have a streetcar. We've got to put segments together because we're not New York City where we can just go somewhere quick. And so the streetcar originally, that's on the right, you see those purple lines, that was the original route of the streetcar. And you can see it's going right past houses there on 33rd and Robinson. And it went all the way to 36, all the way out east to Martin Luther King, all the way down to south, the Capitol Hill. I mean, it went everywhere and people, they didn't have cars. And so they hopped on the streetcar and went places. And because we had that density that I talked about earlier, there was enough people to ride the car. We know now that it's sort of, you know, the streetcar is great and it's cool, but it's been mostly a tourist and a kind of a thunder thing and a circulator, but it doesn't quite go far enough for everybody to actually take it places. So we hope to get there, but we need that density. We need enough people in one area to actually ride it, to get things like that. That would help us with that. And it's the same thing with like, with neighborhood services. If you want to see how walkable you are, there's this website called walkscore.com, and you can just put in your address and get your walk score. And you can see they have like 5 different rating: Walker's Paradise, very walkable, somewhat walkable. And it depends on, you know, they're looking at what in the middle, like what you can, what can you walk to? Dining, park, shopping, errands, school, entertainment. That's how they're getting the walk score. This is kind of hard to see, but this is a neighborhood in Dallas that on the left is the neighborhood, regular, you know, single family houses. And on the right is a grocery store. And it's not fenced off and, you know, go away. I mean, I can walk from my house into the grocery store and back if I need to. And it has a score of 86. It's not even Walker's Paradise. It's just very walkable because I guess in that little shopping center, you can't get to everything you need, but it's very walkable. And so if you want to kind of understand, and you can just put in different addresses and see how walkable they are, it's kind of fun. And the third thing that we've learned over the years is that when you can get out and walk more and walk places and use the streets more, you have more interaction with your neighbors. You know your neighbors more, rather than just kind of wave from the driveway and you're getting in your car. And once we get more dense, we can promote the redevelopment of vacant properties, which decreases crime in a neighborhood. We can creates kind of mixed income neighborhoods, which can decrease concentrations of poverty. It revitalizes the schools and churches and community organizations that have kind of deteriorated in the core. And then it can create opportunities for generations to live near one another and support each other in ways that we sort of forgot how to, or we weren't paying attention to until now. We're about, the baby boomers are about to like be a lot of people, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So neighborhood interaction is for mental health, and we found that we've gotten smarter since the 1950s. The fourth thing is about city services. When we did the comprehensive plan, our plan at KC, you can see we had these ABC scenarios, and we tried to cost out. A was, okay, what if we just do the same thing we're doing now, which by the way, we're still doing since this is maybe from 2013 or so. And we're still sort of doing scenario A, even though Plan OKC said, let's do scenario C, because they looked at the costs of things and said, okay, and not just financial costs, but the costs of city services. We have to develop more square miles, that's more roads. So you can see across the rows and we weren't even, ABC wasn't even that much different. A was, let's stay 29% rural, like we are now kind of, and C was, let's stay 44% rural. Let's make sure we preserve our rural areas. So it wasn't that much density. I mean, there wasn't that much difference in these scenarios, but go down the next slide, T.O. Just on, if we just talk about maintaining roads, which that's the kind of the number one thing we hear is our roads have potholes and they're steep, and they do as much as they can, but it's a lot of roads to maintain. And between scenario A and C, it was going to be, if we do scenario C, which is just a little more density, we save 800 million a year in road costs, maintaining the roads. And if we, let's say for fire services, for example, under scenario A, it's about 270,000 per square mile to operate the fire service right now. And under scenario A, that's an additional 50 million, and under scenario C is an additional 20 million. So if we would build under scenario C, we would save another 30 million in city services. So the choices we make as far as how we develop and how we zone have a lot of implications on our budget for the city and what we can fund and not fund. Finally, we're learning that as you change throughout your life, that your housing choice changes. I mean, I don't know why, but I happen to have lived in almost every housing type since I was born. I mean, I've lived in suburban, I've lived in a cul-de-sac, I've lived in a high-rise in Miami, I've lived in like a 3-story walk-up flat in Spain. I mean, I don't know why I've lived in all these things. So I kind of understand the pros and all of them have pros and cons. And it's a lot of personal preference and also just where you are in your life, where you are in your financial situation, what type of social interaction you need or want, and schools. And so we have to understand that people's lives are changing all the time, and their need for housing is going to be changing all the time, all across the city. And I just picked out one example of the seniors on the next slide. We did just a map of people over 65 by census tract from the 2020 census. Now, some of these hot spots, the redder areas, may reflect like nursing homes or some facilities that have been constructed in different areas, but that's where our seniors are. So they're out in further away areas where, they're going to have to drive, or, if they're in a center, okay, but then that means granddaughter has to go drive a long way to see them. So they're living in places, if they're not in a nursing home, they're living in places that aren't really walkable, where they need a ride to the, to the doctor's appointment or to the grocery store. And it's more complicated than if you could just take a short ride on a bus to go to the doctor. And we had some people talk to us about that they moved out where they can afford, and there's not as much transit. And this lady was disabled, and she goes, man, I never knew it would be so hard as I moved out to get on the bus and go somewhere, because I used to live more in the core and it was easier. So and then there's all kinds of maps we could make like this of like cultural things or locations of grocery stores. I mean, we could go on and on about this all the time, but the point is that our housing needs change throughout our life. And so we have to be prepared to, as a city to provide that. And I think, so the next slide kind of just shows some of those differences. Like right now we have this thing called senior independent living, and it's like a siloed place, like an apartment thing. And I'm sure that's very nice to live in, but you're by yourself. You're not in a neighborhood. I mean, you're in your own neighborhood, I guess, with a gate. I don't even know if that has a gate. But you're sort of siloed off. You don't have a yard. Whereas these something they're called cottage courts in the middle with all the flowers, the houses are around a courtyard. And it's just a different form of housing, like the missing middle, where everybody can come together and do like a potluck dinner, and everybody can watch out for each other on their porches. And then you have like smaller homes, no yards on the upper right, or you have where you could actually live in a building where there's step downstairs. So they're just all different options.
And Marilyn, I thought I would mention the term aging in place, which is a thing that a lot of people are talking about these days. And it doesn't mean the first type that you mentioned, where you live in this apartment far away and can't really get to any services, but you're in a place where you can access more of those because of the mixed use and the density that's been allowed through the zoning. So the thread of the presentation, following that all the way through, of having walkable places is better as people age because they're able to access more things, without having to either get in a car if they can't drive anymore, or navigate, the transit system. So,
maybe they've lived by like Overholser all their life and they want to stay there. All their friends are there, their church is there, where they went to school. But if there's no options for them, they have to move, or just stay where they are. So the takeaways from tonight is this term density is confusing and hard, and it's really the form. Like Paul asked the best question about the missing middle. It's not how many dwelling units per acre, because you can look at a property and it's either 30 or 125 or what, you don't even know what it is. It's just about the form that matters. And if we have the right form, you won't even know how many dwelling units per acre. You won't even care. And then housing choice, we really need to be able to meet people's needs as we change and as we grow. I mean, who thought we could do, a meeting on a phone 2 years ago? I mean, that's crazy to me that you can have a meeting on your phone with other people. We don't know if there's going to be drones flying around. I mean, we don't know what is going to happen in 10 years, but we need to be prepared for changes, and then also this other thing is this vehicle miles traveled is really our air we breathe. I mean, that's bottom line. We have to do something about it, or we're not gonna be able to breathe. So I think that might be the last. There might be one more slide, T.O. I don't know. Oh, so when we do start talking about the new code, we have these land use topology areas from the comprehensive plan. And it's pretty much what people said is they wanted that scenario C, where we preserve our rural areas. We don't keep growing out and out and out and out. And so when we talk about the densities that the comprehensive plan that we came up with, these base areas with a high intensity, medium intensity, low intensity, and rural intensity. So 4 intensities, but look at the dwelling units per acre on the right. I mean, of course, the rural is not even, it's like decimals. Urban low is still like 4 to 8. Even when we get into the light brown, urban medium, we're talking about 10 to 40. And then in the core, in the downtown and in the dark brown area, we're still talking about 40 to 100. So the comprehensive plan doesn't talk about New York City density. We don't need to do that. I mean, we have so much land, we don't have to do that. And so unless people want to, like I said, if you want to live in the First National building, it's 600 dwelling units per acre. And in downtown, sort of anything goes, even in the current zoning code. But so just to kind of give you the scale of what the comprehensive plan is saying and what we're trying to zone for. I think there might be one more slide. Now that you're sort of experts, we do have this survey out about housing types you'd like to see in your neighborhood, and it's open till November 11th. So if you haven't done it, you can either QR code or you can just, I think Ashley's going to send out the slides, right, Ashley, or post them somewhere.
Yes, we're able to post slide. Oh, not even thinking that I have my system. We're gonna send the slides out after this, as well as I believe you have a focus group coming up too, right? On the 3rd, is it?
Yeah, it's only related to the urban medium neighborhoods, okay. But yeah, so do the survey if you haven't already done it, and let us know now that you're a little more expert about what kind of housing you'd like to see in your neighborhood or what you don't want to see in your neighborhood. And I think my contact information is down there at the end, but that's all I have. And I know it's hard and you don't have to remember any of this, but hopefully it gave you some other things to think about density.
Right. We do have one question, Marilyn, in the chat from Paula about the data from the air quality chart. So I'm just going to scroll back to that real quick.
Okay.
So that came from Adapt OKC. It was this city's first sustainability plan. I believe that's the one. I want to make sure we're talking about the right chart here. And so this was data that came from the Center for Neighborhood Technology. And so it calculates the CO2 emissions per from automobile use per household. And so that doesn't take into account things like electricity use or other things that can also generate CO2 emissions. But it's also important to note that it's not just CO2 that's coming out of tailpipes. And so we have volatile organic compounds, particulate matter over 2.5 and microns, that's a measurement of it. And then also the oxides of nitrogen. And so those are things that the EPA manages and measures. DEQ, our Department of Environmental Quality, the state agency here in Oklahoma, they have sensors around the metro area. And so they take air quality readings and they submit our numbers, our design values is what they're called, to the EPA for that group of emissions called criteria pollutants. And the reason they're interested in those is those are what are precursors for ground level ozone. So while we think about emissions coming out of tailpipes or going from smokestacks into the atmosphere, some of it stays down here where we breathe. And that's called ground level ozone or smog. And that's what causes a lot of those respiratory illnesses. But it also can affect us economically because if we go into what's called non-attainment, that is if our readings that we send to the EPA exceed their threshold, that said, there can be certain actions that are taken to make it can be more difficult to expand roads, to spend federal dollars without reducing CO2 or proving that certain projects would reduce CO2. And so there's a lot that can go into that, and it's really complicated, but it affects our health and our economy pretty drastically by driving so much. And again, it's a product of our size because we are 621 square miles, and that's no accident. But again, we have to deal with those regulatory issues as well as acknowledge that it does have a direct effect on public health. But again, it was the Center for Neighborhood Technology.
Yes, Paula, that you can read all about it at Adapt OKC, which is the council approved that as a part of the comprehensive plan. What is it, 2020, 2019?
No, yeah, in 2020. So it was going right into our public comment period right as COVID was hitting. And so we had an online public process, but we are looking at a major update of that plan for 2025. So there'll be more to come on that. And I'm going to scroll back down real quick. Everyone close your eyes so you don't get dizzy. Just so you have Marilyn's contact information. In this email address. Any questions can go to codeupdate@okc.gov. And then we've got a website set up, and there's also a link to the survey from that website. But we'd love to have your feedback on the survey too.
If you have pictures of things you like and don't like, or you're like, what's the density on this thing? Or you want to just know, just to start thinking about it. I'm happy to calculate it for you. Or it's kind of interesting once you start comparing, and once you look at it so much, you're like, it really doesn't matter the density. It's really the form. I mean, it took me a while to come to that conclusion too, even as a planner. And I'm like, you know what? They're really right. It's just the form. Why are we worrying so much about the density?
Awesome. So I think is that the end of this presentation, Marilyn?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to chat or.
Yes, I would like to open it up for questions. If anyone in our group has questions, please feel free to, at the bottom of your screen, click the reactions button and click the raise hand button so that we can see your question. Or if you want to put in the chat, we will keep an eye on the chat. for questions. I think you're exactly right. You know, I had Marilyn and T.O. and Katie, I had the privilege of working with Dan Paralek, the author of Missing Middle, and he said the same thing. He said, this is a means to an end. Missing Middle is more about form and scale than anything. And so, unfortunately, though, like in the urban core, when the idea of density or the topic of density is thrown around, people get really nervous because of the types of multifamily units people are building now, and it sort of disregard architectural integrity and fabric of the community, which directly impacts neighborhoods. And you know, I joke around, I'm saying all this, guys, but I'm giving you time to get your answers in the chat and raise your hands if you have questions. Excuse me. And I remember going to one of the neighborhoods, I can't remember, it was Jefferson Park or somewhere in Paseo, and I was talking about density. They were like, we don't want that type of stuff in our neighborhood. I'm like, you already have it. It's already there, actually. And so, but it seamlessly fits into the neighborhood when it comes to the architectural style, the setbacks, everything blends. And so that's the point of density as well, I would assume, as a neighbor, is to build something that upholds the architectural integrity and fabric of the community. And so I'm hoping that's what I think we're working toward.
That's right. We had a comment from Mara Porter in the chat that she came to this meeting thinking that low density for her neighborhood was a good thing, and now I have a whole new perspective. And so that's great. That's exactly what we hoped the takeaway would be, that you know, it doesn't always mean that low density is the only way, but density is a spectrum, and there's everything in between. And some of those things are really important. Again, as we talk more about affordable housing, and you hear about affordable housing crises and things like that, it's a big deal, and it doesn't always mean we need to build affordable housing units all in an apartment somewhere. You know, we need this mix and options always equal more affordability. So that's really great takeaway. Thank you, Mara. Any other questions for us?
Yeah, I mean, if you go and because sometimes you just walk around the neighborhoods and you think it's all single family houses, but stop a minute and count mailboxes, count meters, you know, electricity meters, and you're like, wow, oh, I mean, I'll stop all over it. I mean, wow, that's 4 or 5 units in there. I didn't realize that, because it doesn't look like it is.
Yep.
Any other questions for discussion? All right, that sounds good. Let me see, you guys, you answered all the questions we had in our minds about density. And so what I want to do is launch a quick evaluation. If you could just tell us how this workshop went. You're gonna see it pop up on your screen in just a moment. Thank you to all those who attended today. We appreciate your input and your feedback. It helps us be better and pare down on the information that's important to you. You should see your workshop evaluation poll, just 3 questions there. You can answer those for us. We greatly appreciate it. This may be politically incorrect. I was going to ask you, Marilyn, if you had any favorite infill, multifamily infill projects in the city.
They're also different, you know, and since I haven't lived here that long, I was saying that, I mean, Oklahoma City is really special with the missing middle. I mean, because I've never lived in a city where it actually is. And so we have it already. And if you just look around, I don't really know what my favorite one is.
I can point out, while you're thinking of that, I can point out it wasn't exactly an infill project, but it was an aspect of an infill project that I know that some of these infills are using. But they're actually using prairie plants and native grasses for their yard. And so they've made these little cells, and in combination with rocks, and they have all these beautiful plants that, again, like used to grow here on their own. Oklahoma was a prairie, and for by and large. And so, you know, that's one piece. They're on 17th between I don't know, Classen and something over there by the Plaza District. There's a couple of really good examples of using native plants and coreopsis, and I mean, there's everything you can think of mixed in there. So really good pollinator habitats. I think that's a good idea for front yards.
Yeah, I love that. And then some of them had like rain gardens, I want to say. That was it.
Yeah, you can capture some of that sediment. You see all the sediment that's on the streets, and you know, again, anything that goes in our storm drains goes straight to rivers and streams and lakes, and so it doesn't get any pre-treatment and nothing like that. So you can do a little pre-treatment on your own if you have a little curb cut rain garden that can capture some sediment and some of that's nasty stuff off the road, and let your plants do some filtering.
We're going to need to have you back for a completely different workshop, T.O. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We're going all night about that. But yes, we'll definitely have you all back. Thank you all again so much for participating in the workshop. If you have more questions, you have Marilyn's contact information, I believe, that was on the screen. And then we will send out these slides to all of the attendees. And yes, exactly, yes, it is recorded. And so thank you again, and you all have a great night. Bye-bye.